The next step for Stats Assignment 4, item number 1, is to create a code book. So here is our data set, and now we are in Data View, and to create the code book you need to go to Variable View. You see that we have the names of our variables here, and in the code book we are going to enter a label for each of these. You will be entering a label. I will do this for one of these so you can know how to do it for the rest. We will define the values, and the other thing that I would like to do before we get started is to think about whether this data is scale, ordinal, or nominal. So you can see when I click over here I get this little option of selecting what kind of data it is. So age, we can see just by looking at age that these are likely ages. And what I'm going to do now is bring over a Word document that describes the data set that I uploaded with these data files so that you can understand the data that you're working with. So here's our Word file that describes the data. And you get the sample size, nice size sample I would say, the number of variables. But then what's important here is this description of the variables. So you should create a document like this for your data when you have it for your capstone. So this is a good idea for having a document that tells you about your data so that you can go back to it years after you finish your capstone and recall this important information. So here we can see that this is participants' age in years. So we're going to use that to label the data. So now we have that very nice label. So when we make a graph or when we make a table, we're using this label instead of this rather ambiguous label because that doesn't define the unit at which age is measured. Here, we have age group, and now we're going to create a code book by entering these values. We're going to further create our code book, and we're also going to think about whether this is a nominal or an ordinal. Obviously this is a scale measure because you have these equal intervals in number of years, so they are equal intervals between each of those numbers. But we have to, let's define these values and then we'll think about what the appropriate label is. So we go over here and we look at age, and number 1 is defined as this, and number 2 is defined as that. So we simply enter the value 1, and then you can actually copy from your Word document if you want to, and just put that, you should be able to paste that right in there, which you were able to do. And then it's very important to add it, because if you click OK without adding it, it will simply disappear. Now I'm going to show you kind of a snazzy thing that you can do as you're creating labels, because sometimes you have like a list of labels that gets a little old. So instead of adding number 2, I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to go in and I am going to change this to a number 2, and then I can just go in and revise my years, 18 to 26. And then I can add that new variable that I've created. So that can sometimes be a helpful way to save you time. Probably didn't save us time for 2 variables, but they're there. So notice how when we hit OK now, we've defined the meaning of 1 and we've defined the meaning of 2. So now let's think for a minute about whether this is a nominal or ordinal variable. Obviously 1 has fewer years than 2, so this is an ordinal variable. There is a order to 1, 2 is larger, and we would assume that if we had another age category it would be even larger, or potentially smaller, but that's what ordinal means, and those numbers have to have a meaning. The number 1 and 2 have to have an incremental increase in order to be ordinal. And we're going to save our data set, and we're going to call it simply Gardasil. So we have that for later. And notice now we've saved that. So let's do one more, and we'll do that for another variable. And this variable is the patient's race, and we usually don't have to define that. Although we usually think of Hispanic as an ethnicity rather than a race, so we'll call that race ethnicity, because we'd want to have a more accurate descriptor if we were making graphs and tables. And I think sometimes they do it like this. So once again, we go in and we enter those values, and we look over here to see what our values are. So 1 is so now we've got our code book created for race. Be sure to click OK. And then it's important to think, in this case, whether this is a nominal or an ordinal variable. And in this case, obviously, there's no order. These are simply categorical variables. Notice you can correct misspellings easily. And we might want to be kind of consistent for the purpose of our chart looking nicer, of having these each be a capital letter for the first. And then, so you notice how easy it is to revise these post hoc. And we're going to leave this as a nominal category. So at this point in time, you can go ahead and have the information you need to create a code book for these others. And then you are done with item number 1.